Good evening, everyone. I don't want to hold off any longer. We have an hour. We want to make sure you get all the information you came to listen to, the important information, and not just to me. Buenas noches y bienvenidos a Campus Academy. So I just want to say that if you prefer to listen to this webinar tonight, it can be transcribed in Spanish or in any other language, and the directions to do this should be available to you, or will be made available to you by Sam. Si lo prefieres, puedes utilizar la opción para que esta presentación sea transcrita en español o otro idioma. Las instrucciones para hacer esto están disponibles en el chat. I just want to let everyone know that there are other options. I only speak Spanish, so I can only translate Spanish, but the closed captions have several options for different languages. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I am Liza De Jesus. I'm the director of Compass from Monmouth, NJ4S, and you'll hear more about that shortly. I am with Preferred, which is an amazing organization that covers mostly Monmouth and Ocean County, but has a presence across all 21 counties across the state of New Jersey. We're a nonprofit, community-based organization, creating opportunities for individuals and groups, youth and families to become healthy and to receive prevention services, mental health services, and recovery services. So tonight we are here to listen to a webinar, and not to me, but I just quickly want to give you an opportunity or allow me an opportunity to share a little bit about our program, NJ4S Compass, which is new to New Jersey and to Monmouth and Ocean County. Preferred has awards for both Monmouth and Ocean County, and this program was created to fill the gaps of prevention and mental health throughout the state of New Jersey. Locally, we call NJ4S, which stands for New Jersey Student Support Services, statewide student support services, Compass, which is creating ocean Monmouth prevention and supports for students. And what this program does is it will allow us to deliver multi-tiered system services within a multi-tiered system. So tier 1 would be universal support, or in another language, in a simpler language, it's one session program. So opportunities to go out to schools and do a one-time presentation to students, staff, and or to parents, or to go to local sites like libraries or faith-based organizations throughout the community. That tier can be done for any age from pre-K to 12, and again to students, adults, and parents and or staff. It is open to all of them. So tier 2 are multi-session programs. They're evidence-based programs that will be delivered within the schools to students who are at risk for, who are at risk. And those tier 2 programs are multi-sessions, and they can be facilitated with students from 6th to 12th grade in public and or charter schools throughout Monmouth and Ocean County through Compass. Tier 3 are for mental wellness. So tier 3 are one individual sessions or group sessions for students, for staff and or staff and families that are suffering from mental health issues. So it is very important that we are able to provide these services in each and every tier throughout Monmouth and Ocean County. Tier 3, again, is open to public schools and charter schools for 6th to 12th grade. The core, there are 4 core areas that we are focusing on: substance use prevention, sexual health, pregnancy prevention, suicide prevention, and anti-bullying and violence prevention. However, if a school, a student, a family has needs outside of these areas, we will give you information on how to reach us. Please do not hesitate to contact us, even if those needs are outside of these areas. We are here to fill the gaps. We're not here to duplicate services, but we do want to fill every gap that we can, even if they do not fall under these focus areas. We've gone through this. So again, tier 1, just to really quickly go through anything we've missed. Pre-K to 12, it is for public schools and charter schools, and there is not a referral process. Tier 2, there is a referral process from the school. It is for grades 6 to 12 for public and charter schools, and it's for those 4 core areas and any other area that a student or family may have a need. And tier 3 are the mental health services, and again, a referral is needed through a platform that the schools have access to, and it's for grades 6 through 12 in public and charter schools. This is not crisis, it's not for emergency situations, but it is a great service where students can be assessed and referred. So today we have a presentation from Partnership to End Addiction, and Compass is proud to collaborate with this organization. It is a non-profit organization based out of New York City. The organization is dedicated to transforming how the organization is dedicated to transforming how our nation addresses addiction by empowering families, advancing effective care, shaping public policy, and changing culture. Resiliency is something that can be fostered, nurtured, and developed in children from a very young age. This webinar, Raising Resilient Kids, will provide valuable information on raising children that have the ability to bounce back from tough times, and not just bounce back, but thrive in the best of times. It is my pleasure to introduce Linda Richter, Senior Vice President of Prevention Research and Analysis, and Corey Hammond, Director of Prevention Services from the Partnership to End Addiction, to bring this great information.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Liza. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides. All right. Perfect. So I think we're ready to jump in. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate your time this evening. We are going to be talking about raising resilient kids. Thanks again, Liza, for the introductions. My name's Corey. I'm the Director of Prevention Services. I'm joined by Dr. Linda Richter here. And then also on the prevention team at Partnership, we have our great research assistant, Olivia. So what we are going to be talking about this evening is what resilience is and what we mean when we say that term. We're going to go through some key protective parenting strategies. We're going to talk about protecting mental health and physical health. We're going to talk about strengthening family functioning and parent-child bonds, promoting school and community connection. And so what does it mean to raise a resilient kid? When we say that word, what do we mean? So resilience is the crucial ability. Oh, and I meant to hit record. Are we able to record this?
Our webinar on my end is already recording. It began
Oh,
at the very
fabulous.
beginning. So we are
Awesome.
good to go, Corey.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Okay, so resilience is the crucial ability to withstand, overcome, and rebound from a challenging situation or experience. And so we believe that it is the responsibility of all adults who interact with children to help provide a consistent, stable, nurturing, and supportive environment that will promote the mental and physical health of children, will provide a protective shield against adversity, foster strength, growth, future orientation, and well-being. And so we have the Parent's Guide to Raising Resilient Kids. And so this guide is the framework for this presentation today. The guide itself can be found on our website, which is drugfree.org. But what this guide entails, it's research-based best practices for strengthening all of those things that I said before. It highlights some practical strategies that parents can use to foster the development of resilience in children, with the overarching goal to help prevent substance use and steer children away from other unhealthy and unsafe behaviors that can compromise their well-being and their future. And so when we talk about resilience, these are some of the attributes that we're talking about. And we think about them at 3 different levels. So individual level attributes, things like a child's social and emotional skills, something like having a positive temperament and having feelings of self-efficacy. And then we move to the family unit, where things like warmth and cohesion go into play, having strong, clear expectations as a family unit, and parental involvement and monitoring. And then kind of the larger sphere here of the community itself, feeling connected to your school, having a trusted adult mentor, and having strong social networks. And so if you can imagine a graph, so you have like a x-axis going across and a y-axis on top, we're saying that our x-axis is the amount of a certain attribute that you have, and the y-axis is the amount of protection that it gives us. And so like this purple graph here, for some attributes, the more that we can get of it, the better that we are. And that would look like this first graph. And so this graph would be things like social and emotional skills, because the more social and emotional skills a person has, the better protected they are against risk factors. The more safe your neighborhood is, the more safe your kids are going to be. But some attributes work a little bit differently, to where we don't want too little of them, but we also don't want too much of them. And so then these factors provide the most protection with like a medium amount. And so that graph looks something like this. The peak protection is in the middle, and having too much or too little on either side is low levels of protection. And so this type of graph would be for attributes like family wealth, parental monitoring, or attachment style. And so this might feel a little counterintuitive, but having extreme amounts of wealth does not lead to positive outcomes. And when it comes to parental monitoring, too little is obviously a bad thing, but having too much of it, like helicopter parenting or not allowing your kids any privacy, that also doesn't lead to good outcomes. And so as we're talking about these attributes of resilience in kids, it can be interesting to think about what's going to end up being the most protective for kids. But the main point that we want to hit home is that resilience is a skill that can be practiced and honed. It's not something that someone either has or doesn't have. And so we want to think about it as a dynamic process that can change over time and be built over time. And so if we can acknowledge the risk and protective factors that exist naturally in our family, you can help to focus your energy on the things that you can change. And so thinking about that, we can't change someone's family history or their genetic makeup, but we can have an impact on how connected they feel to their school. We can have an impact on how much sleep they get every night. We can have an impact on whether we spend quality time with them when they come home from school. So these are the things that you can focus your energy towards and make a big difference. And so now I'm going to pass it off to Linda, who's going to go through different parts of a child's life that we're trying to improve by instilling resilience.
Thank you, Corey, and thanks everyone for attending tonight. So if you have an opportunity to take a look at the guide that Corey mentioned, and that will resurface again toward the end of this, it really touches on 4 key areas of a child's development, health, and well-being that relates to resilience, and talks about ways that families can really foster resilience in each of these 4 domains. So the first one that I just want to mention briefly is mental health. So we know that we keep hearing in the news and in the media that there is a child mental health crisis. The U.S. Surgeon General reported one recently that it's a national emergency, and many other public health and health organizations have come on board with that. And in fact, we know that millions of children in the United States struggles with mental health problems, and that the problems are more severe now than they were before the pandemic. So there's about 1 in 6 children who are pretty young, between the ages of 2 and 8, who are diagnosed with a mental health disorder. Those numbers just get higher as kids get older. And the key thing is that if it's left untreated, then that tends to worsen through adolescence and adulthood and produces all sorts of other potentially, adverse consequences, including substance use and other problems. Now, we know that childhood mental health problems will almost always require some intervention from a professional, a healthcare professional, and that earlier intervention is going to be more effective than just sort of waiting it out. So there is a limit to what parents can do in many cases to prevent a mental health problem in youth. So we don't want to imply that, oh, if you just sort of hug your kid or, give them the right opportunities, they're not going to have a mental health problem, because that's not realistic. But what we do want to focus on are the things that parents can do to help foster resilience to the risk factors that might increase a young person's risk for developing a mental health problem. And there are quite a number of those risk factors, but also quite a number of things that parents and other caregivers can do. Next slide, please. So just to give the gloomy side of things, we know that one of the main categories of risk factors for youth mental health problems are what's known as adverse childhood experiences, which is sort of a scientific or researchy term for early childhood experiences that induce trauma or intense and persistent stress in young people. And here you could see that it affects about 35 million children ages 0 to 17. And we know that when this, one of these categories that you see on the slide exists in a child's life, especially from an early age, and that it persists for a number of years, it could really produce sort of this persistent state of stress in a child's life that, induces what's known as a toxic stress response, which really can impact how a young person's brain develops and ultimately affect their mental health and also physical health, and a whole range of consequences down the line. We also know that some of these effects are intergenerational. And the key thing is that the more of these that there are in a young person's life, the directly proportionally related they are to the higher risk of seeing some of these negative outcomes that we don't want. Okay, next slide. So that's all very sad and gloomy. So what we want to talk about are what can parents and caregivers and other important adults in young people's lives do to sort of counteract that, assuming that a child has those kind of negative experiences or traumas or stressors in their life. So a lot of it comes from the home and through modeling and natural exchanges between parents and children. And one thing we really want to try and do for young people is to instill in them the ability to sort of recognize, control, and express their reactions and emotions in a measured and appropriate manner. The goal is not to suppress unpleasant feelings, anger, frustration, crying. That's all natural responses to an unpleasant event or something negative. What really builds resilience for a child is to understand that they can have those negative emotions, those negative reactions. For a few minutes, they could sort of express them in however they feel that will be helpful. But what we really want to do is teach kids to then get them under control, not necessarily stop the bad feeling, but to react appropriately to the experience and to their emotions, and to understand that they're fleeting. There are things they can do to get out of it, and manage those feelings down the line so that they don't sort of become all encompassing and take over. And parents really can serve as a guide for how these emotional reactions and responses to them can look in a healthy way, and help kids make sense of them. So we don't want to suppress that a kid is feeling bad. As I said, we just kind of want to help them express it in a natural way, but also understand it so that it doesn't become overwhelming for them. So, for example, if a child experiences joy from something that a parent thinks is undesirable, so for example, riding a bike without a helmet, or a teenager who drives too fast, those are good feelings. Those feel really good. We all like to do that if we could, right? So a parent doesn't have to sort of negate that positive feeling and motivation for it. What they could do is teach them that even though the experience feels good, it isn't healthy or safe in the long term. So it's acknowledging the reason why a young person is doing something risky or wanting to express themselves in a certain way. It's not dismissing it, but it's acknowledging it, but then putting it back into a context. And then on the reverse side of it, if a child feels frustrated or angry, if they experience something that, we know is healthy or safe for them. So think, for example, of having a child eat some vegetables that they really don't like, or skipping a party in order to study for an important test. Parents can help them understand the benefits despite the initial or temporary bad feeling. So it is normal, it is acceptable, it is okay for the child to express negative feelings about having to do something that's unpleasant or they don't want to do, even though it's good for them. But being able to sort of manage that and control it and see the bigger picture is really what we're trying to achieve from an early age through early adulthood, essentially. Okay, next slide. So that's sort of briefly mental health, and Corey's going to come in here in a few minutes and give you some more practical, implications of some of these more broad ideas. But when it comes to physical health, we also know that it's really important to help children develop habits that will protect their physical health and address any threats they have to their physical health or as early as possible. Because what that does is it sort of gives them the bandwidth to experience life and experience social interactions and challenges in a way that will allow them to develop confidence and resilience and the wherewithal they'll need to really take on life's challenges and also benefit from its opportunities. Next slide, please. So clearly there are some physical health conditions that kids have that are genetic or that are unavoidable. And we know that so many children face undue burdens to their health due to largely preventable health complications as well. So there are those that are really out of a parent's control in terms of a child's health, and those are unfortunate. And then there are those that are a little bit more within our control. So what we could do is really try to boost those things that are within our control and, try and give kids resilience so that they can manage the health conditions they may or may not have that are outside of our control. So what are things we could do? We could really do prevent health implications that are due to poor diet, lack of exercise, inadequate sleep, substance use, obviously at a later age, insufficient visits with healthcare providers. And what we want to do is address existing threats to kids' physical health as soon as possible so that we can increase their likelihood of developing resilience to any physical health problems that might come their way. Next slide, please. So one obvious one is obviously nutrition and exercise. That's something you hear all the time. And clearly there are a lot of differences among people in terms of how they can access nutritious food or have opportunities to engage in healthy physical exercise. We know that 20% of children and adolescents in the US are obese, which potentially leads to a whole range of health complications that start in early childhood. And we know that millions more are living in homes with food insecurity and may experience some form of malnutrition. We also know that a lot of people struggle with access to finding safe parks or playgrounds or opportunities to engage in physical exercise in a safe way. And we also know that overuse of screens really undermines health, but in some cases, that's the safest opportunity for a young person to, spend their recreational time. So there's no judgment here. It's just these are some of the challenges that kids face when it comes to protecting their physical health. Next slide, please. We also know that other risk factors to kids' health that we have to try our best to kind of counteract relate to sleep. And sleep is just really the undercurrent behind a whole range of risk factors that kids have and adverse outcomes that kids experience, whether it's substance use or poor academics or a whole range of mental health problems or symptoms of mental health problems that we see in young people. We know that consistent and sufficient sleep really supports children's brain development, their physical growth, and their mental health. And it's really important to remember that kids need a lot more sleep than adults do. Infants need about 12 to 16 hours. 6 to 12-year-olds need about 9 to 12 hours, and teenagers need about 8 to 10. So let's not get mad at them when they have a hard time getting up at 6 in the morning to take 3 buses to school. It is really working against their natural cycle. We know also that about 70% of high school kids don't get the recommended numbers of hours of sleep that they're supposed to have, and that it really puts them at higher risk for attention and memory problems, weakened immune system, obesity, diabetes, injuries, depression, anxiety, a whole range of other health problems. And it's also a very significant risk factor for nicotine, alcohol, and other drug use. So that's not to just kind of put a ton of pressure on parents, and it's really hard to get kids to sleep, especially teenagers, but really prioritizing it will have amazing effects on all these other things we're concerned about in a young person's life. And the other thing that's really important is to ensure that children are getting regular checkups with a pediatrician, a dentist, healthcare providers, so that those health professionals might be able to identify early any signs of risk or areas of concern and address them early. Because if you take away anything from here, it's don't hope and think something's just a phase or something's going to just pass. If there is something of concern, it always pays to seek the help of a professional or a trusted relative, teacher, community member, so that you can have a sense if an intervention is needed or not. And we also know that a lack of awareness of how to avoid preventable injuries in young people is a significant risk to their physical health. So that could be for young kids, burns or drownings or poisonings. And as kids get older, we have, vehicle crashes and falls, which are really the number one cause of death among children, these sort of preventable injuries. And obviously what those concerns are will change as the child gets older. Next slide, please. So another thing that we really think is important to stress when it comes to building resilience for kids is to really ensure as much as possible that within the family, we foster parent-child bonds and healthy, safe functioning among family members. Next slide. So unconditional and consistent support from parents to children fosters family strength, safety, and security, and promotes resilience. And now I recognize that that is just a mouthful of easy things to say and much harder to execute. So trust me, I realize that. But really what's very important is that it's becoming increasingly clear that many of the obstacles to young people, to families of forming this kind of secure, stable environment for kids is outside the control of families. These are sort of environmental conditions, policies, things that an individual family might not be able to handle. However, there are things, despite that families can do for their children to boost resilience and ensure that their kids feel a sense of stability and consistency and security and safety within their family unit. So some of those things within the family that's really important for building resilience, family conflict, intense, frequent, persistent, or unpredictable conflict, including that nonverbal anger when you're furious at your partner and you just don't speak for a while. Children are feeling that. It can cause a lot of stress among young children, and it can cause health effects down the line. It's confusing to kids of all ages, and it just induces this lack of predictability and consistency and safety, which is so critical for healthy child development. The other thing is a lack of quality time spent together. And again, I know that comes from like a privileged space to say, oh, spend a lot of time with your kids. Quality time doesn't have to be a whole formal event. It doesn't have to mean you're going to Disneyland together 3 times a year. It could just mean, you're doing laundry together, you're cooking a meal together, you're going shopping together, you're running an errand together, you just chat for 5 minutes before the child goes to bed. It doesn't take a lot. It just takes that when you are spending that time together, there's a mindfulness there, and that is your focus, and that it's not a distracted 5 minutes. So an undistracted, intentional 5 minutes is worth a whole lot more to a child's development than 6 hours sort of being together, but you're both doing different things or not paying close attention to one another. The other thing is taking an adversarial approach rather than a team approach to being a family. And we see that a lot with parents who are frustrated, especially by teenagers. There develops this us against them mentality, where kind of the parents versus the kids are seen in sort of this adversarial relationship. And I get that. I have teenagers. I completely understand that feeling. What really helps with that is to try as much as possible to put yourself in the child's shoes and try and understand that whenever a kid is doing something, there is usually a rational reason for it, even if it is not a reason you agree with. Kids are not looking to just create conflict. They usually have a reason for their behavior. So to whatever extent possible, we could try and sort of understand the why behind a young person's behavior. It really helps to diffuse some of that conflict and adversarial nature of it. And one thing that contributes to that is this fourth point, which is fun and sort of a lightheartedness in the family. And that's hard to do when you have a lot of stress and a lot of things to take care of, and life seems like a ticking clock. But even just a couple of minutes of silliness, showing some vulnerability, being a little playful, making gentle fun of yourself, of each other, nothing harmful or negative, but just sort of lighthearted. It just eases the tension in such an incredible way, and allows for kids to feel safe and secure and close to you. An overarching theme here is to really try and take as much as possible a health-based approach to these family interactions, to focus on promoting kids' health and safety more so than punishing the things you don't like to see in their behaviors. Really, again, recognizing that a lot of kids' behaviors that seem undesirable or unhealthy to you are happening for a rational reason, and usually a developmentally appropriate reason. We all have been kids, but we somehow, I don't know, it's evolutionary that we quickly forget what that was like and what drove us. But there's usually a really good reason for why kids are doing things, even if we don't agree with it. And understanding that motivation behind kids' behaviors could really help them think of healthier and safer alternatives to achieve those goals that don't produce these sort of negative outcomes. And then the last of these categories that we really want to talk about today is this notion that Corey mentioned earlier, which is connection. A positive connection for kids to their school and community is really protective for kids. And it actually is so important in helping them to develop resilience. Kids who feel connected to their school, to their community, to their peers, to their social environment are more likely, and this is from the research, to engage in healthy behaviors, to succeed academically and socially. And the reason is because these kind of connections give kids the practice they need, essentially, to learn life skills, to learn how to engage with other people, and to prepare them to move through life with more confidence, because every challenge they take on and succeed at, even if it's very little, that boosts their confidence a little bit more that they could take on the next challenge. So children who feel connected to their school and community, again, the research shows, are more likely to engage in healthy behaviors, do better in school and socially. And these kind of strong connections give kids the life skills that they need to foster a sense that they belong to something, that there's a purpose for their life, that there's meaning to it, and that it pays for them to invest their time, their energy, in their schoolwork, in their community, in volunteering, in their social engagements, in their family, because somebody cares about it. They matter. Like, there's a reason why they're part of the milieu, and it makes a difference to the people around them. So some risk factors that could interfere with this kind of engagement, or things that get in the way. One is a tremendous problem that our kids are facing more than ever, which is social isolation and loneliness. We know that kids who experience mental, physical, or family problems are going to have a harder time feeling invested in and connected to their school and community. So again, it's one of those things that's easier to say than do, especially for kids who are at a disadvantage. Social isolation and loneliness could self-perpetuate. It could make kids avoid school and community activities. And it just kind of is a cycle that's hard to break out of. And it can also mean that kids are going to miss out on important social opportunities, which can get in their way of their healthy mental and social development. So one reason that sometimes kids are avoidant and don't engage is because they feel unsafe around their peers. And that's a significant problem. You know, it could be the experience of being bullied or being threatened to be bullied. It could be living in a physically unsafe neighborhood, whether due to high crime rates or high rates of substance use, or just an unsafe environment. And some of those things are not things that we could just take care of as parents or undermine, but it's important to understand what is driving a young person's sense of not wanting to engage and not wanting to be part of a social group. Again, there's usually a reason for it. But we also know that kids who are victims of bullying do worse in school. They avoid going to class, they avoid participating in things. And we know that although any child can be a victim of bullying, some are at higher risk than others, as you all well know, such as those who are LGBTQ+ or have a disability. The other important consideration are kids who experience racism or discrimination that we know has such short and long-term toxic effects on a child's health, education, relationships, self-confidence, and resilience, and gets in the way of a child's progress. And it also just it perpetuates the cycle of adversity. So obviously that's something that's beyond an individual family to eradicate, but there are things that parents and caregivers can do to help buffer those adverse experiences for young people. Next slide. And one of those things that's really important for kids who have these kind of risk factors is to have adult mentorship. It's one of the most important protective things for young people that boosts resilience, is a relationship with a trustworthy and supportive adult. It could be a parent, it could be someone in the community, it could be an older sibling or cousin, it could be a coach, a teacher, and they really just need one really solid adult relationship, which can really help children navigate challenges in their life and boost their resilience, even when they're facing problems or setbacks. Safe and challenging activities allow kids to explore, hone their interests, bolster their social and emotional skills, and improve their health. And we also know that participating in volunteering, or what's known as civic engagement, is really important to kids as well, because it really, again, fosters the sense of purpose or mattering or meaning, which is so essential for a young person to develop this resilience. I feel like, hey, maybe I didn't do so great today, but people are out there who care if I show up tomorrow and who think that I add value. And that's why I'm going to pick myself up and keep going, even though I just experienced this challenge or setback. So this kind of gives us the bigger picture of where we come at this resilience issue. And I'm going to pass it back to Corey to kind of bring it home to really practical examples.
Thanks, Linda. So far it's been kind of high level, talking about what is resilience, what things impact it, but how do we actually put this into practice in families? And so kind of disclaimer here, as a parent, you can't possibly eliminate all obstacles to healthy development, but decades of research shows that parents are the single most important influence on children's attitudes and behaviors and are a critical source of that resilience. And so we have our 10 key protective parenting strategies. And these strategies are all in that guide, but we're not telling you how to raise your kid. You know, you're the expert of your own child and you're going to know what works for you and doesn't work. But these are some evidence-based tips that can help in a situation when you're searching for some guidance. Parenting is obviously very hard and there's no perfect solution to every problem, but these strategies can help. So we're going to go through each of these, explain what they are, answer some common questions, and I'll leave you with a practical take-home tip for each one. And so our first one is just starting early. It's never too early to promote healthy attitudes, emotions, and behaviors. It's also never too early to start responding to risk factors that you see. And so, you know, someone might ask, responding to risk factors, what does that mean? And so this means being aware of anything that could bring adversity into your child's life. Maybe they're neurodivergent, so building effective communication skills is going to take some extra practice. Maybe you're prone to anxiety and your kid is too. And so having them meet with a cognitive behavioral therapist could be helpful. Maybe there's not a lot of outdoor green space in your neighborhood. So taking extra time on the weekend for sports or activities elsewhere could be helpful. So you just want to be proactive about anything that your kid might be up against. And so our practical tip here is, how do you promote healthy behaviors? And this is, you can allow young kids autonomy over small household tasks that they can encourage, that they can accomplish with some encouragement. And so they can feel that they're succeeding at something and feel like they're contributing. And this could be something as small as helping to prepare dinner, folding some laundry. It also allows them to make some mistakes along the way, but they know that they can try again and correct those mistakes. Number 2 is knowing the facts and being the credible source for your kids. So that's keep learning from trusted sources, and more importantly, know when to say that you don't know something. So, knowing what's a credible source can be difficult at times, but saying, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll help you find out, is a lot better than taking a guess or lying. So how do you know if something's a credible source? Getting and checking information from your pediatrician is always a great idea. And just because someone has, millions of followers on social media doesn't mean that they're a reliable source. So always check for that second opinion. I would be wary of information that you can tell is trying to sell you a product. And so our practical tip here is just sources of information online that come from sites that end in .gov, .edu, or .org are almost always going to be more credible than something that comes from a .com website. So you can check those URLs and be on kind of a more accurate track. Being a good model for health and resilience. Even if they're not listening to you, your kids are watching what you do. And so normalize making mistakes, having imperfections, but bouncing back and trying to improve. And also important to model seeking help when needed. But I can't be perfect all the time. We totally get that. Being imperfect is important to model as well. Flaws and slip-ups can demonstrate effective coping and social skills. We can model how to apologize, forgive each other, and be honest about our shortcomings. And it's important that kids know and can see the ability to reach out for help when it's needed. And so our practical tip here about modeling is trying our absolute best to not convey that it takes a drink or a pill to relax. The wine mom trope is cheeky and like a funny meme, but it does promote alcohol as an escape or a coping mechanism. So, even something like remarking about needing a glass of wine after a long day can normalize drinking as a coping mechanism and can plant seeds of misuse in our kids' brain. So if you are a parent who drinks alcohol, it's important that you model that alcohol is something that you can use responsibly for enjoyment, and not something as a necessity, as a way to cope. And kind of along those lines, communicating openly and honestly, having open conversations to develop strong mutual trust. And this doesn't have to mean one big serious talk about everything. This can be more effective if you keep it brief, ongoing, and casual. And you can take advantage of natural opportunities to bring up certain topics. And so a natural opportunity could be passing by a vape shop or seeing someone smoking weed in a movie. Use those quick opportunities to bring things up. And so this is a question that we get a lot. What do I do if my kid asks if I've ever tried drugs? Do I answer honestly? And the truth is that experts kind of disagree on this. And so the best but annoying answer to this is that it depends on your experience and it depends on your kid. There's definitely wrong ways to go about this conversation. Oversharing is absolutely a possibility. But also lying has the potential to break trust with your child and lose your credibility. So you want to avoid giving more information than asked for, but share what you've learned as you take a look back on it, while focusing on the larger point being that you don't want your kid to use drugs. And so an example of this could be, saying, I tried marijuana because some kids I knew were experimenting and I thought I needed to try drugs to fit in. It took me a while to discover that that's not a good reason to do anything. Do you ever feel pressured like that? we want you to like keep asking questions and remember that it's not about what you did in your past, it's about their future. And so a practical tip around this is that you can use a car ride as an opportunity to have a talk about substance use. The lack of eye contact, everyone having to look forward, can help a teen feel more at ease, and there's an inherent time limit. Park the car, park the conversation. Sharing expectations, set clear boundaries and limits, make your stances known, and follow through on agreed upon consequences, but base those expectations in love and concern for their health and not just because I said so. How do I know what's a reasonable boundary and what might be too strict? And boundaries and expectations are going to look different for every single family. Just as bedtime will change as kids get older, other boundaries will change too. And if kids feel that they've been a part of the decision around expectations, and if they've been a part of the conversation about specific rules, they might be more likely to follow those rules. And so the practical tip here is if a specific boundary continually gets broken, have a family meeting, but have a processed, focused conversation. And so what that means is asking questions like, what's getting in the way of you sticking to what we agreed to? Questions like that can help you get to the root of the problem and help you move towards cohesion. Monitoring behavior and well-being. This is spending quality time together. Like Linda said, it doesn't have to be a lot amount of time every day, asking lots of questions, but just knowing where your kids are, what they're doing and who they're with, and keeping an eye on screen time and social media. And so we often get asked, at what age should I let my kids have social media accounts? And this is another difficult question where people, experts will tell you different things. Legally, most social media apps require you to be 13 years of age, but we know that this doesn't mean that a 13-year-old is equipped to handle unmonitored access to all corners of the internet. Organizations that are devoted to this topic, like Common Sense Media is a great one. They say that social media sites, they rank them as being appropriate for like 15, 16-year-olds. But more than a specific age, you're looking for responsibility and maturity. The effects of too much screen time, like sleep deprivation, those things are going to be more detrimental to a teen than they would be to an adult. And we do know that screen time can be treated kind of like an addictive substance in kids, similar to as you would with nicotine. So parents have a right and a responsibility to be involved in their kids' social media use. And this is not, you can emphasize that you're not just being nosy or not just trying to get in their business, but it's your job as a parent to keep them safe. And so our practical tip here, encourage kids to use their parents' monitoring as an excuse to not post risky things or engage in risky behavior. So letting kids use their parents as a scapegoat, even if it's not true, is very useful. So, even if you wouldn't, so you can have their kids say like, sorry, my mom checks my phone. She would definitely ground me if she saw that. Even if you wouldn't actually ground them or whatever consequence you say, it doesn't matter. Your kid knows that they can always get out of something that would make them uncomfortable. They can lie as much as they want in the service of keeping themselves safe. Taking a health approach, this is one that we kind of have already talked about, but supporting health rather than punishing unsafe behaviors. That primary concern should always be protecting health, safety, and well-being. But what if they do something wrong? Do I not punish them? And it's highly unlikely that your kid is behaving poorly just for the fun of it. As Linda mentioned, there's usually a rational reason for fights, outbursts, or bad behavior. And so we're not telling you to not have consequences when a child violates rules and does things that they're not supposed to do. A health-based approach simply means that the consequences are explained and agreed upon in advance. And the focus is always on protecting safety and well-being, not just obedience for obedience sake. And our practical tip here is if your child has lied to you, try to figure out why they lied in that moment, rather than going straight to reprimanding. So understanding that motivation can help prevent that same lie from happening in the future. We want to encourage healthy risk-taking and emotion expression, help them go out of their comfort zone in a safe way. as Linda said, stress, anger, fear, these are all normal emotions that we don't want to suppress, but we just want to have them be expressed in healthy ways. And so what if my kid isn't a thrill seeker? That's fine too. I was not a very risk-taking child. And you can let your kid decide what they're interested in and help them pursue that. And so it's just important for kids to feel stimulated and challenged. It doesn't mean that they all need to be rock climbers and divers and all of these really kind of exciting things, but we just want them to gain confidence and self-efficacy in whatever they pursue. For kids that are naturally thrill-seeking, realizing that early and putting them into activities where they can harness that energy safely can help them avoid higher risk behavior in the future. And so our practical tip here is kind of getting down to the root of what they want. Brainstorm with your teen about the types of activities that they would find stimulating and challenging. So asking them, like, what's the most exciting thing you can imagine doing? If you had a whole day to do whatever you wanted, what would you want to do? Do you like physical things like sports? Is that what makes you happy? Creative things, drawing, playing the guitar. Do you like emotionally satisfying activities like volunteering with animals? Just trying to understand what is going to be their challenging activity. Using positive reinforcement. We want to give positive feedback when kids show effort or engage in desired attitudes and behaviors. What if my child doesn't do anything worth praising? This was a real question that we had one time from a parent, and we understand that this might absolutely be how you feel sometimes. But we just want to remind you that those behaviors that get praised or are positively reinforced are more likely to continue. So even just normal daily tasks like, getting up on their own without your help, making it to school without complaining, putting effort into their homework. These small things can be reinforced in the hope that they'll continue. We want to focus on the effort, not the outcome. And this is a tough one to try to get in the habit of doing. And so it's more effective reinforcement to say, I appreciate how much effort you put into studying for that test. You worked really hard, rather than you got an A, great job. And finally, knowing your child's risk level and responding accordingly. So we want to be vigilant for and responsive to signs of risk, knowing when to seek help for both your child and for yourself, but also making sure that the risk matches, or making sure that the response on your end matches the risk level. So this means not over or underreacting. A child doesn't need to go to inpatient therapy treatment immediately if they just tried marijuana or started vaping, but you might have to have a different kind of response for a different child who is struggling with depression or other co-occurring disorders and also drinking frequently. So we want to make sure that that response matches. And the question here, I found out my teen tried marijuana. How do I convey the seriousness of this without overreacting? And in this case, there's a lot of tips, especially if there's a history of addiction in the family. That child's going to be more likely to have a problem that could lead to addiction in the future. And so understanding that risk and explaining this to your child in a direct way that conveys that concern is going to be really helpful. It helps to think about addiction as any other health problem that might run in your family. We want to let our kids know about that history so that they can be more careful and responsive, because they know that they might have to be more careful than a friend who doesn't have a history of addiction. And again, going back to that health-based approach, it's about their health and well-being, not punishment. Come from a place of love and concern. Keep a cool head and try to withhold judgment as much as possible. And get down to the bottom of why. So the why of why a child starts using substances can help you understand where your child might need more help, whether it's peer pressure, curiosity, boredom, anxiety that they're trying to medicate, anything like that, and continually share your expectations that you don't want them to use substances. And our practical tip here is do your absolute best to not have difficult conversations in the heat of the moment. Wait until things calm down and a reasonable conversation can be had, like the next morning. And just, I know we're almost out of time or overtime here, but very quickly, our resources for you. These are all on our website, drugfree.org. We have the guide, Raising Resilient Kids, that you can read, print out, use however you like. We also have text messaging programs where you can get help and hope text messages to help use some of these points in your day-to-day life. We have playbooks to help you know what to do in certain situations. These are also available in Spanish. We have a substance use risk assessment tool. Take a 5 to 6 minute survey and get tailored feedback based on your current situation. And this is not a diagnostic tool. It's more of a, here's my situation, how worried should I be? And this is also available in Spanish on our website. And yeah, finally, I think Linda and I can stay on for a little bit longer if people have questions that they want to ask, but I do know that it is past 7:30. So if you have to hop off, that's really okay. Here is our contact information. And I wanted to make sure that if you have the opportunity and you have your phone with you, we would really, really appreciate it if you could take the feedback survey. This is both for our feedback as presenters and then also for NJ4S and Compass to get some feedback as well. So that would be really very helpful.
Thank you so much. I do have 2 questions on here. The survey was posted in the chat, so feel free to kind of start go ahead and clicking. I do have 2 questions for Corey and Linda. Question number 1 is, can you provide examples of specific situations or challenges where resiliency is particularly important for children?
Sure. I could give that a try, and then Corey, you can answer it, or anyone else on the call who has a great idea. So I think it's often when, when kids do experience some really significant challenges early in life that are persisting and go on for a while, and that don't lend themselves to an easy solution. And that's where you really want to kind of find little ways to help a child cope so that they're not brought down by those traumas or experiences or stressors. More practically speaking, let's say in school age kids, I think the bullying is an important one. Or, so that's sort of like the next tier level where a child really does not feel like they have a place socially in their community, in their school, in their peer group. And that could be just so hard and so complicated. So there it's like giving kids little tips or helping them role play or just kind of come up with little solutions and find ways to navigate that. It's not easy. Often it involves, speaking to a teacher or a mental health counselor, getting outside help so someone could sort of navigate that situation with you as a parent and see what's actually going on, let's say in the school itself, because sometimes it's hard to know just based on what your kid is telling you or not telling you. But it should be taken seriously, and the child should be, given the strengths and the tools and the skills that they need, that they can navigate as much as possible that difficult situation. And then as kids get older, there's just a whole range of them. But those are some that really stand out. I think we encounter quite a lot where it just sort of seems like, oh gosh, what can a parent do in this situation to help their kid? Corey, was there something that occurred to you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, another example that's maybe not as serious as bullying or all of these other things is, every kid is not going to be great at everything. And so having resiliency and these social and emotional skills when some kid is not as good at math as they are at all of these other subjects, having the ability to bounce back from, making mistakes and not having it ruin everything, just consistently being able to move on and do better next time is going to be really helpful.
Thank you so much. We have one final question here. Are there any warning signs or red flags that suggest a child may be lacking resiliency or struggling with adversity?
I mean, I would really say like the key things to look for, probably 2 things. One is this notion of like self-isolation and sort of withdrawal. So if a child feels overwhelmed that they can't cope with whatever challenges are coming their way, it's pretty natural to sort of hang back and stay away from any situation where they might encounter that challenge. So if you're seeing like a shift, you may have a shy child who isn't very extroverted, and if that's consistent across time, that's probably not a warning sign. It's really when you see these shifts in a child's behavior that you want to pay attention and say, well, something's going on that's really causing this now. So that might be something. So again, like the social withdrawal or isolation or lack of willingness to engage in things that they were willing to or excited about in the past. I would say that's one. And another is sort of this persistent emotional negativity. So again, it's so normal for kids to be sad sometimes, to be in bad moods, for that to persist for a few days, especially if there's a precipitating event that you could point to. I mean, then it just makes sense, right? Their best friend moved away. They're going to be sad about that for a while. That's a normal reaction. But when something doesn't get better over time, when they can't really articulate what's causing it, when there's that vagueness about it, and you're just sort of seeing that malaise and that like real significant change from their natural state or their previous state, that I think is when you really want to kind of pay attention and say, well, something's really causing this now, that we have to give this child some support and skills to navigate the problem. Corey, I don't know if there's something you wanted to add.
No, I think that was a great answer.
All right, thank you so very much for the questions. We are bringing Liza back to kind of wrap up our webinar. Feel free if you have any other questions, add them in here real quick. We can try to squeeze anything out. Actually, we have one more, as I just mentioned. How do you encourage a child to seek professional help?
So one of the things Corey mentioned in her 10 parenting strategies was modeling. And I think what's really important is from an early age, if the child, this is not definitely going to answer and it's not going to work all the time. But one thing you want to do is set the stage from a very early age for a child that asking for help is actually a good thing and it's okay and it's acceptable. And part of doing that is to model that. So a lot of times parents feel, especially with younger kids and teenagers, that they have to have all the answers, that they have to put on this face like, I got this. You want to know anything, you come to me, you look at me, I'm doing everything right, I'm perfect. That really has, sort of it could backfire, because it's basically the child's looking at the parent and saying, well, if I'm not perfect, then I'm no good. And then what am I going to do about that? So if a child can see a parent or other trusted adult say, hey, I actually don't know how to handle this right now. I'm going to go ask for some help. I'm going to see who, talk to someone about this. And that's a consistent thing throughout the child's life. It's going to normalize help seeking, which is really an undervalued attribute for young people, and for all people, actually. Get help when you need it and make that an okay thing to do and not something that a child has to feel shame or embarrassment for.
And I would just to add quickly, we know that family-based professional mental health help has some of the best outcomes out of all types of therapy. So family therapy, even if it does feel like very much an issue with one specific child, getting help together as a family and kind of changing the way that everyone's relating to each other in the household can be much more effective than just individualized therapy or help.
Thank you so much again, Liza. It's all up to you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Corey and Linda. Thank you so much for all that great information and for providing us with some tools that we can put into use. I have children in my 20s now, and the family meetings were something that, as a Latina family, we never did, but I did with my kids, and my family probably looked at me like, what are you doing? But it actually worked, and it really did open up communication lines and strengthened our bond. So thank you so much for all those different little strategies and things that we can do as parents, which is not an easy job, right? It's the hardest job on earth. So we appreciate you. So I just have, if I can share one last slide. Thank you. I won't keep you long because I know because of the technical issues, we did start late. So I just want to share this slide and encourage folks. I think Sam is going to put the link or has put the link in the chat. So I just want to encourage folks to take advantage of this self-paced online wellness tool that is free to all families and youth through Compass and even to school staff. So there are short, engaging courses and training tools for personal development. There are single sessions of developmental courses on numerous wellness topics, and it is all free. So this is something that, you know, because we know there are not enough folks to reach each and every person all the time when it is needed. This is something that could be at your fingertips in seconds, that could really help you when you just need that extra assistance or that extra, you know, relaxation exercise. So please take advantage of it. In addition, again, I just want to thank each and every one of you for sticking with us through our technical difficulties tonight. And I want to wish you all a safe and warm night. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Liza. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.